The morning briefing in the Hegemony Intelligence Center always started the same way. Rows of alien officers from 12 different species would gather around the massive holographic display showing the galaxy's current threats. Today, like every day for the past 1,000 years, the Sol system glowed a peaceful green on the threat assessment map. Lieutenant Corax shuffled through his daily reports with practiced boredom. The young Altarian had been assigned to monitor Earth's sector for 3 rotations now, and it was the most mind-numbing job in the intelligence division. Nothing ever happened. No signals, no ship movements, no signs of life whatsoever. Still dead? Asked his superior, Commander Thane, a grizzled hegemony veteran with cybernetic implants covering half his scarred face. Completely silent, sir. Same as always. Corax tapped his datapad. Our long-range sensors show no electromagnetic activity, no thermal signatures, no movement patterns. The entire system might as well be empty. Thane nodded and moved on to more pressing matters. Border skirmishes with the Zenthari Empire were heating up again. Trade disputes with the Vorthan Confederacy needed attention. Resource allocation for the mining operations on Kepler 186F required approval. Earth was just another dead world on a list of thousands. But Earth wasn't dead. It was just very, very patient. Deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, in a facility that existed 3 miles below the seafloor, Director Maya Cross reviewed the morning intelligence reports. The underwater complex stretched for hundreds of miles in every direction, its corridors carved from solid rock and lined with materials that could withstand the pressure of the deep ocean above. Hegemony fleet movements? She asked her aide, a young man named David who had never seen natural sunlight in his entire life. Standard patrol patterns. They're not even bothering to mask their routes anymore. Admiral Torvin seems convinced we're extinct. Maya smiled grimly. Admiral Torvin had been making the same mistake for 60 years now. The Hegemony's arrogance was their greatest weakness, and humanity had been studying it carefully. What about the Zenthari situation? Border war with the Hegemony is escalating. They've moved 4 battle groups to the disputed zone. Civilian casualties are mounting on both sides. Maya walked to the massive viewing window that looked out into the abyssal depths of the ocean. Strange lights moved in the darkness. Not fish, but human vehicles going about their daily business in the deep-sea cities that now covered Earth's ocean floors. 1,000 years ago, humanity had faced a choice. They could join the galactic community as junior partners, accepting whatever scraps the established powers decided to give them. They could fight a hopeless war against forces that outgunned them by factors of millions. Or they could disappear, entirely, and use the time to become something new. They had chosen to disappear. The final human transmission had been sent on March 15, 2157. It was a simple message broadcast on all frequencies. Earth signing off. Thank you for everything. Then silence. The galaxy had waited exactly 1 year for humanity to change its mind. When no follow-up message came, the major powers had simply divided Earth's star system among themselves on paper. The Hegemony claimed the inner planets. The Zenthari Empire took the outer gas giants. The Vorthan Confederacy got rights to the asteroid belt. Earth itself was marked as a failed colony world and forgotten. What they didn't know was that humanity had spent those 1,000 years building something unprecedented, not just cities or ships or weapons, but an entirely different way of thinking about civilization itself. Director, David's voice interrupted her thoughts. We're receiving the daily reports from the Deep Space Monitor Network. Maya turned from the window. The Deep Space Monitor Network was humanity's greatest secret, a web of invisible stations and sensors that stretched throughout the galaxy, watching everything the major powers did. Hidden in asteroids, disguised as space debris or simply too small to detect, these monitors had given humanity a complete picture of galactic civilization, and what they had seen was not impressive. Summary: the Hegemony destroyed another pre-industrial world yesterday. Species designation Kappa 7. They were mining rare metals and didn't bother to relocate the native population first. Estimated casualties: 4 million individuals. Maya closed her eyes. This happened at least once a month somewhere in the galaxy. Advanced civilizations would find a world with valuable resources and simply take what they wanted, regardless of who or what was already living there. The Xanthari? Slave raids in the Outer Rim. 3 more systems have gone dark. Their population estimates suggest they've captured approximately 50,000 sentients for their labor camps. The Vorthons? Still claiming to be the civilized alternative while strip mining gas giants for fuel. They displaced another nomadic species last week, the Wanderers who lived in the clouds of Altair 7. No one knows where those people went. Maya nodded grimly. This was the galactic community that humanity had been invited to join. These were the advanced civilizations that considered themselves superior to primitive species like humans. What's the status on Project Awakening? David consulted his datapad. All systems are ready, the network is in position. We have monitoring stations in every major system, and our stealth technology remains undetected. When you give the word, we can broadcast to every device in the galaxy simultaneously. Maya walked back to the window. In the distance, she could see the lights of New Angeles, one of the larger underwater cities. Its spires stretched up toward the distant surface, but even its highest towers remained hidden beneath miles of ocean water. Humanity had learned to build down instead of up, in instead of out, together instead of apart. They had turned their entire planet into a garden while the rest of the galaxy fought over scraps and destroyed worlds for temporary profit. Sir? David was waiting for orders. Maya thought about the morning reports. More dead worlds, more enslaved populations, more species driven to extinction by civilizations that called themselves advanced. 1,000 years was long enough. Send the message, she said quietly. David nodded and activated his communicator. All stations, this is Deep Command. Project Awakening is now active. Repeat, Project Awakening is now active. Across the galaxy, hidden human stations began to wake up. After 1,000 years of silence, humanity was about to speak again. And this time, everyone would listen. The age of watching was over. The age of action had begun. The alarm klaxons in Xanthari High Command had never sounded this particular pattern before. War Master Krell had heard every type of emergency signal during his 40 years of military service, but this was something new entirely. The pattern meant one thing that should have been impossible. First contact with an unknown civilization. But there were no unknown civilizations left. The galaxy had been mapped, cataloged, and divided centuries ago. Krell rushed into the communication center, where dozens of technicians were frantically working at their stations. Screens flickered with incoming data streams, and the air buzzed with overlapping conversations in 6 languages. Report! Krell barked. Technical Supervisor Nex looked up from her console, her normally calm expression replaced by barely controlled panic. Sir, we're receiving a transmission that shouldn't exist. It's coming from everywhere at once, and we can't block it or trace its origin. Explain everywhere at once. The signal is appearing simultaneously on every communication device in Xanthari space, personal communicators, military networks, civilian broadcasts, even isolated systems with no external connections. It's as if someone is speaking directly through our own equipment. Krell felt his blood chill. The Xanthari Empire had the most advanced communication security in the galaxy. Their military networks were supposed to be completely isolated from outside interference. What's the message? Before Nex could answer, every screen in the room suddenly displayed the same image. A simple blue and white planet rotating slowly against the black of space. Earth. Then a voice spoke. It sounded human, but it carried an authority that made even the battle-hardened Xanthari warriors step back instinctively. Greetings, galactic neighbors, this is Earth. We've been watching. Krell grabbed the nearest communication console. This is War Master Krell of the Xanthari Empire. How are you accessing our secured networks? What do you want? The voice continued, as if he hadn't spoken. For 1,000 years, you've treated our silence as extinction. You've divided our star system among your empires on your star charts. You've planned mining operations on our worlds and moons. You've spoken of us as a cautionary tale about primitive species who destroy themselves. Around the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out. In the hegemony's capital ship, Admiral Torvin was shouting orders at technicians who couldn't explain how their most secure systems had been compromised. The Vorthan High Council was meeting in emergency session, their peaceful deliberations replaced by urgent debates about this impossible transmission. Even the neutral trading stations and independent colonies were receiving the message. There was nowhere in civilized space that the human voice couldn't reach. We permitted this dismissal because it served our purposes. Your assumption of our death gave us something precious, time to grow without interference. The image on the screens changed. Instead of Earth, they now saw a vast structure in space. It looked like a city and a fortress combined, its surfaces gleaming with unknown materials that seemed to bend light around them. We have observed your wars. We have watched your expansion. We have seen how you treat worlds that cannot defend themselves and species that lack the technology to resist. You. War Master Krell felt his warrior's instincts screaming warnings. The structure on the screen was larger than any space station in Zenthari territory, and its design suggested technologies far beyond anything the galaxy's greatest powers possessed. We have seen you destroy civilizations for their resources. We have watched you enslave populations for labor. We have witnessed you wipe out entire species because they occupied worlds you wanted to claim. The voice paused, and in that silence, every military commander across the galaxy felt the same cold realization settling in their minds. 1,000 years ago, we nearly became like you. We chose a different path. Technical Supervisor Nex was running every scan and trace program in the Zenthari arsenal, but her instruments showed impossible results. Sir, according to our sensors, this transmission is coming from inside our own communication arrays. It's as if our equipment is generating the signal itself. That's impossible. I know, sir, but our systems are reading the signal as originating from within our own networks. Someone has complete control over our communications infrastructure. The implications hit Krell like a physical blow. If the humans could access their communications networks this completely, what else could they control? Weapons systems, life support, navigation. On the screens, the image changed again. Now they saw fleet movements, Zenthari ships, hegemony, vessels, Vorthan exploration craft, all viewed from angles that should have been impossible to achieve. Your fleets move in patterns you believe are secret. Your military strategies are planned in rooms you think are secure. Your weapons are designed using principles you consider advanced. A chill ran down Krell's spine as he recognized some of the ships on screen. Those were vessels from classified operations, missions that weren't supposed to exist in any official records. We have been watching all of it, learning from it, and preparing for the day when our silence would no longer serve the greater good. The voice grew harder, more serious. That day has arrived. Across the galaxy, emergency meetings were being called. Military commanders who had been fighting each other for generations suddenly found themselves united by a common realization. They were not the apex predators they had believed themselves to be. You call yourselves civilized, but civilization is not measured by the power to destroy. It is measured by the wisdom to preserve. It is not proven by the ability to take, but by the choice to give. The image on the screens shifted one final time, showing worlds that the major powers had written off as worthless. Barren rocks, gas giants with toxic atmospheres, systems too far from trade routes to be valuable. But in the human transmission, these worlds were transformed. Forests grew on formerly dead planets. Cities floated in the atmospheres of gas giants. Space habitats orbited distant suns, their lights forming patterns of impossible beauty. We have spent 1,000 years learning what you have not. That true strength comes not from the power to destroy, but from the ability to create. Not from the fear you can inspire, but from the hope you can nurture. War Master Krell looked around at his staff. These were some of the finest military minds in the Zenthari Empire. Warriors who had conquered dozens of worlds and commanded fleets that could crack planets. But now they stood in confused silence, unsure how to respond to a threat they couldn't understand or counter. We are no longer silent, the voice concluded, and the galaxy will never be the same. The transmission ended as suddenly as it had begun. Screens went dark. Emergency klaxons fell silent, and the communication centers across civilized space were left in stunned quiet. But the silence didn't last long. Within hours, emergency fleets were being assembled. Ancient enemies were calling each other to form desperate alliances. The greatest military minds of a dozen species were trying to figure out how to fight an enemy they couldn't find or understand. Humanity had announced its return to the galactic stage, and nothing would ever be the same again. The reconnaissance fleet that approached the Sol system 3 days later was the most advanced scouting force the hegemony had ever assembled. 12 ships equipped with the latest scanning technology, stealth systems, and enough firepower to level a small moon. Their mission was simple: find out what had happened to Earth and determine if it posed a real threat to galactic civilization. Flight leader Voss had handpicked each member of his crew from the hegemony's elite forces. These were veterans of a dozen border wars, soldiers who had seen action against every major power in the galaxy. If anyone could handle whatever they found in the Sol system, it would be them. But nothing had prepared them for what they discovered. When they dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of human territory, sensors are showing massive gravitational distortions, reported Navigator Ben, his voice tight with confusion. The readings don't match any known stellar phenomena. Visual confirmation? That's the problem, sir. Visual shows empty space, but our instruments insist there's something here the size of a small planet. Voss moved to the main display screen. The contradiction between what their eyes saw and what their instruments reported was making his head hurt. Empty space should not generate gravitational fields strong enough to affect their navigation systems. Could it be a cloaking device? Unknown, sir. We've never seen anything that could hide an object this large from visual detection while still allowing it to affect local spacetime. Suddenly, the empty space in front of them began to shimmer like heat waves rising from hot pavement. The shimmer spread outward in expanding circles until it covered an area larger than their entire fleet. Then, as if someone had flipped a switch, the invisibility fell away. What they saw made seasoned warriors gasp in shock. A structure hung in space before them, but calling it a space station would be like calling a star a flashlight. It stretched for hundreds of kilometers in every direction, its surface a seamless blend of organic curves and crystalline formations that seemed to grow rather than be built. Towers rose from its main body like the branches of some impossible tree, each one larger than the hegemony's greatest military stations. And it was beautiful. Not in the harsh, angular way of military constructions, but with the flowing elegance of something that had been designed by artists rather than engineers. "By the void," whispered Weapons Officer Cray. "How long has this been here?" Before anyone could answer, a voice spoke from everywhere at once, as if the space itself had found words. "Welcome to the Sol system. You are now entering human space. Please state your intentions." Voss tried to project the authority his rank demanded, even as his hands shook slightly. "This is Flight Leader Voss of the Hegemony Reconnaissance Fleet. We are here to investigate unauthorized activities in this system under the authority of the Galactic Border Treaty of—" "What treaty?" The question was asked so gently, so reasonably, that it took Voss a moment to understand its implications. "The Galactic Border Treaty of 2847, which established jurisdiction over unclaimed systems. Unclaimed by whom?" Again, the reasonable tone made the devastating logic impossible to ignore. "By the recognized galactic powers. Who declared this system unclaimed?" Voss felt the ground shifting beneath his arguments. When Earth went silent, the system was declared abandoned under standard salvage protocols. And who authorized the application of salvage protocols to an inhabited system? The questions kept coming, each one delivered in that same patient, almost teacher-like tone. But they were cutting through 1,000 years of galactic law and precedent as if those laws were made of paper. Communications Officer Dell was frantically trying to establish contact with Hegemony Command, but his equipment showed only static. "Sir, I can't reach the fleet. Something's blocking all outbound transmissions." "You are not being blocked," the voice explained. "Your messages are being held in a temporary buffer. They will be delivered when this conversation is complete." We find that outside interference often prevents productive dialogue. More structures began materializing around them. Ships, or what Voss assumed were ships, appeared from nowhere. They moved like living things, their hulls reflecting starlight in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Each one was larger than his flagship, and they surrounded the hegemony fleet with fluid grace. You came here expecting to find the ruins of a dead civilization. The voice continued. Instead, you found humans. We understand your confusion. The galaxy has not seen what we have become. What have you become? Voss asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. Gardeners. The word hung in space between them, seeming inadequate and terrifying at the same time. For 1,000 years, while your civilizations fought over resources and territories, we learned to grow them. While you conquered worlds, we learned to heal them. While you collected species like trophies, we learned to nurture them. The display screens throughout the hegemony fleet suddenly showed new images. Worlds that had been marked as barren in every galactic survey now bloomed with forests and cities. Asteroid belts had been transformed into geometric gardens where crystal structures grew like flowers. Gas giants swirled with patterns of light that suggested vast communities living in their atmospheric layers. This is impossible, breathed Navigator Ben. These worlds were surveyed. They were dead rocks. Death is often temporary, the voice replied. Given enough care, enough patience, enough understanding of the fundamental forces of life, most things can bloom again. The images shifted, showing scenes that made the hegemony crew stare in wonder. Creatures they had never seen before moved through crystal cities. Plants grew in patterns that suggested intelligence. Machines and living beings worked together so seamlessly that it was impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. We learned that civilization is not about conquest, the voice explained. It is about cultivation, not about taking what you need, but about growing what everyone needs. Flight Leader Voss felt his military training warring with a growing sense of awe. But the resources, how do you maintain this without strip mining worlds or enslaving populations for labor? The universe is abundant, came the gentle reply. Scarcity exists only when you limit yourself to taking instead of making. When you learn to work with the natural processes of creation rather than against them, there is enough for everyone. On the screen, they watched automated systems that seemed to grow resources from raw energy, biological processes that turned waste into useful materials, and technologies that appeared to violate everything the galactic powers knew about physics and engineering. How long have you been able to do this? Voss asked quietly. The foundations were laid in our first century of isolation. The advanced applications you see now have been developing for the past 300 years. 300 years. While the hegemony and Xanthari had been fighting their border wars, while the Vorthans had been strip mining gas giants, while the Lyrians had been mediating trade disputes, humanity had been quietly revolutionizing the very concept of what civilization could become. Your people, Voss said slowly, you've been watching us all this time. Yes. We had to understand what you were before we decided how to approach you. And what did you decide? There was a pause that seemed to stretch across the void between stars. That you need teachers. The human ships began to move, not aggressively but with purpose that was impossible to misinterpret. The hegemony fleet found their engines offline, their weapon systems disabled, their life support functioning perfectly but clearly no longer under their control. You will not be harmed, the voice assured them, but you will be educated. Your fleets, your governments, your species, all of them will learn what we learned. The galaxy is too precious to leave in the hands of children playing with dangerous toys. As Flight Leader Voss watched his instruments register complete system shutdown, he realized that humanity's 1,000-year silence was ending not with a whisper, but with a declaration that would reshape everything the galaxy thought it knew about power, civilization, and the nature of intelligence itself. The age of the gardeners had begun. The emergency session of the Galactic Security Council had never seen anything like this in its 800-year history. Representatives from every major power sat around the massive circular table, their usual territorial disputes forgotten. in the face of something far more threatening than border wars or trade conflicts. Chancellor Rax of the Hegemony spread the intelligence reports across the holographic display, with hands that trembled slightly, despite his efforts to appear calm. The situation is worse than we initially believed. All 12 of our reconnaissance ships have gone dark. Last transmission indicated they were intact but unable to regain control of their own systems. Across the table, War Prime Ulan of the Zenthari Empire leaned forward aggressively. This is clearly an act of war. They have violated our territorial sovereignty and captured our military assets. I propose an immediate joint strike before they can what? Interrupted Ambassador Keen of the Vorthon Confederacy. We don't even understand what technology they're using. How do you fight an enemy that can take control of your ships without firing a weapon? The question hung in the air like a physical weight. Every military mind in the room had been wrestling with the same problem for days now. The humans had demonstrated capabilities that made the galaxy's most advanced civilizations look like children with toy weapons. Supreme Administrator Nix of the Lyrian Peace Coalition gestured to the data streams flowing across the display. Perhaps we should consider that this might not be an act of aggression. Their actions suggest they want to communicate, not conquer. Communicate? War Prime Ulan's voice rose to a growl. They've seized control of our communication networks, disabled our military vessels, and made demands backed by unknown weapons. How is that communication? They haven't actually made demands, pointed out Minister Vale of the Independent Systems Alliance. They've asked questions, very uncomfortable questions about our right to claim territories and resources. Chancellor Rax activated another section of the display. Intelligence analysis suggests their capabilities extend far beyond what we've observed so far. Long-range sensors are detecting massive construction projects throughout the Sol system, structures that dwarf our largest space stations, engineering projects that appear to violate known laws of physics. The display showed a series of impossible images, rings of crystalline material encircling the sun itself, collecting and redirecting stellar energy on a scale that boggled the mind. Asteroid belts reorganized into geometric patterns that suggested vast industrial complexes. Gas giants with orbital structures that seemed to extend into their atmospheric layers. How long have they been building this? Asked Ambassador Keen. That's the terrifying part, Chancellor Rax replied. Based on the scale of these projects, they must have been active for centuries, maybe the entire 1,000 years since they went silent. All of this was happening right under our sensors, and we never detected any of it. War Prime Ulan slammed his armored fist on the table. Then we strike now before they can complete whatever they're planning. Every day we wait makes them stronger. With what? Minister Vale asked pointedly. They've demonstrated the ability to disable our most advanced ships without apparent effort. What makes you think a larger fleet would fare any better? The question sparked heated debate around the table. Military commanders argued for immediate preemptive strikes. Diplomatic representatives pushed for negotiations. Trade officials worried about the economic implications of challenging a civilization that might control technologies worth more than all known resources combined. But their arguments were cut short when every screen in the council chamber suddenly activated, displaying the same image that had appeared on devices throughout the galaxy days earlier, the blue and white planet of Earth rotating peacefully in space. Then the voice spoke, and even the most hardened warriors in the room felt a chill run down their spines. Leaders of the galactic powers, we know you are meeting. We know what you are discussing. We thought it was time to join the conversation. Chancellor Rax stood abruptly. This chamber is secured against all known forms of electronic surveillance. How are you accessing our systems? The same way we accessed all your systems, came the patient reply. Your security is based on preventing unauthorized access through external connections. But we are not accessing your networks from outside. We are speaking through components that have been integrated into your technology for many years. The implications hit the room like a physical blow. If humanity had been infiltrating their technology for years, decades or longer, then everything, military, systems, communications, networks, life support on their ships could be compromised. Impossible, breathed War Prime Ulan. Our equipment is manufactured in secure facilities. inspected by multiple agencies. Raw materials? The voice explained, gently. Rare elements necessary for your most advanced systems. Many of them come from mining operations in contested regions where records are incomplete. It is surprisingly easy to introduce microscopic modifications during the refining process. Around the table, faces paled as the representatives realized what this meant. Humanity had been preparing for this moment not for years but for centuries. They had been patient, methodical, and impossibly far-sighted. What do you want? Chancellor Rax asked, his voice barely above a whisper. To show you something, the voice replied. The displays around the chamber changed, showing scenes from across the galaxy. But these were not the usual views of thriving civilizations and successful colonies. Instead, they showed the hidden costs of galactic expansion. Worlds stripped of their atmospheres by industrial mining. Species driven to extinction by colonial expansion. Populations enslaved or displaced by resource extraction operations. The images kept coming, each one documenting a different atrocity committed in the name of progress and civilization. This is what we have watched for 1,000 years, the voice continued. This is what the galaxy calls normal. This is what you defend when you speak of maintaining the established order. War Prime Ulan tried to maintain his aggressive stance. The strong rule, the weak serve. This is the natural order of things. Survival of the fittest. No, the voice replied with quiet certainty. This is the law of predators. Civilized beings are not predators. Then what are we supposed to be? Demanded Ambassador Keen. Gardeners, healers, builders of things greater than yourselves. The displays changed again, showing the transformed worlds of the Sol system in greater detail. Cities that seemed to grow from the landscape rather than dominate it. Technologies that enhanced natural processes rather than replace them. Communities where different species work together toward common goals instead of competing for limited resources. This is what we learned in our silence, the voice explained. That true strength comes not from the ability to destroy, but from the wisdom to create. Not from the power to take, but from the choice to give. Minister Vale leaned forward. You're asking us to change everything. Our entire civilization, our economic systems, our understanding of progress itself. We are not asking, the voice replied, and for the first time it carried a note of steel beneath its patient tone. We are informing you that change is coming. The question is whether you will be part of it or in the way of it. The chamber fell silent as the full implications became clear. This was not a negotiation or a diplomatic overture. This was a declaration of intent from a civilization that had spent 1,000 years preparing for this moment. You have a choice, the voice continued. Learn to become what you claim to be, civilized, or remain what you are, predators with technology, but you will no longer be permitted to consume worlds and species without consequence. The transmission ended, leaving the galactic leaders alone with their thoughts and fears. Outside the chamber, their fleets waited for orders. But what orders could they give against an enemy that had already infiltrated every system they possessed? The age of easy conquest was ending, and the future belonged to those wise enough to grow instead of take. The greatest armada in galactic history hung in space at the edge of the Sol system, like a storm waiting to break. 15,000 ships from 9 different civilizations, their combined firepower capable of cracking planets and boiling atmospheres. Ancient enemies had set aside centuries of conflict to face what they all recognized as a threat to their very existence. Admiral Rex of the Unified Fleet looked out at the assembled might and tried to feel confident. Beside him, his command staff represented the finest military minds from across known space. War Prime Ulan commanded the Zenthari battle groups. Chancellor Rax had brought the hegemony's planet-killer ships. Even the peaceful Lyrians had contributed their defensive fleets to this desperate alliance. Final equipment checks complete, reported Fleet Coordinator Mills. All systems are functioning within normal parameters. No signs of the interference we experienced with our scout ships. Communication networks? Secured through quantum encryption and isolated from all external input sources. If they're going to take control of our systems again, they'll have to do it through methods we can't even imagine. Rex nodded grimly. They had spent weeks preparing for this confrontation, installing new security protocols and backup systems designed to function, even if their primary networks were compromised. Every ship in the fleet had been inspected for unknown components or modifications. Movement in the system? Nothing we can detect. Same gravitational anomalies our scouts reported, but no visible ships or structures. Rex activated the fleet-wide communication system. All ships, this is Admiral Rex. We are about to enter human space to demand the return of our captured vessels and the cessation of illegal activities in this system. Remember, we represent the combined will of civilized space. Whatever they've become, they cannot stand against all of us united. Approving responses echoed from command ships throughout the formation. War Prime Ulan's voice carried the confidence of a lifelong warrior. Let them show themselves. We'll remind them why their species chose to hide for 1,000 years. But as the fleet moved toward the inner system, something impossible happened. The space in front of them simply changed. Not with the shimmer effect their scouts had reported, but as if reality itself was being rewritten. A single ship appeared before them. But calling it a ship was like calling an ocean a puddle. The structure stretched across their entire forward view, its hull disappearing beyond the edges of their sensor's maximum range. It was so large that their fleet could have docked in what appeared to be a minor maintenance bay on its side. "How big is that thing?" whispered someone on the command deck. Fleet Coordinator Mills checked his readings 3 times before answering. Approximately 800 kilometers from bow to stern. Mass readings are inconsistent. It seems to be partially existing in normal space and partially somewhere else. The human ship didn't move aggressively or power weapons. It simply existed, and its existence made every military vessel in the Galactic fleet seem like toys by comparison. Then a voice spoke, not through their communication systems, but somehow directly into the bridge of every ship simultaneously. "Welcome. You have come to demonstrate your strength. We understand. Strength is important, but first, let us show you ours." What happened next would be analyzed by military historians for generations, though none would ever agree on how it was accomplished. The combined fleet found their engines offline, their weapon systems disabled, their life support functioning perfectly but obviously no longer under their control. No energy weapons had been fired, no boarding actions had been attempted. They had simply lost command of their own ships. "This is impossible," War Prime Ulan growled from his command deck. "No civilization has technology this advanced. How are they doing this?" "By understanding something you do not," came the reply. "Technology is not about force. It is about harmony. We do not fight your systems. We simply ask them to cooperate with us instead of with you." Admiral Rex tried to maintain his authority even as his ship's systems reported to someone else. "Return control of our vessels immediately, or face the consequences." "What consequences?" the voice asked with genuine curiosity. "You came here with weapons to threaten us, but your weapons serve us now. You brought ships to attack us, but your ships listen to us instead of you. What exactly do you imagine you can do?" The question hung in space between fleets, unanswered and unanswerable. "You call yourselves the representatives of civilized space," the voice continued. "Let us examine that claim." Every screen in every ship suddenly displayed the same images. Worlds burning under orbital bombardment. Cities reduced to ash by weapons, designed to break the will of entire populations. Species fleeing their homeworlds ahead of strip mining operations that would poison their atmospheres and boil their oceans. "This is your civilization," the voice said quietly. "This is what you have built together. This is what you came here to defend." War Prime Ulan's voice crackled with rage over the fleet communication system. "Those are legitimate military operations, necessary actions to maintain order and security." "Whose order? Whose security?" The images changed, showing the same events from different perspectives. The civilian casualties hidden from official reports, the refugee populations abandoned on barren worlds. The species driven to extinction not by accident but by deliberate policies designed to clear valuable territories. You speak of maintaining civilization, the voice continued, but you have built something else entirely. You have created a galaxy where the strong devour the weak, where technology serves destruction rather than creation, where entire worlds exist only to feed the appetites of those with superior weapons. Chancellor Rax activated his communication system. What gives you the right to judge us? You abandoned the galaxy 1,000 years ago. You have no authority here. Authority is not claimed, came the patient reply. It is earned through wisdom and demonstrated through action. For 1,000 years we have watched you repeat the same mistakes. For 1,000 years we have hoped you would learn to be better. Today we realized that hope was misplaced. The massive human ship began to move, not around the fleet, but through it, somehow occupying the same space as dozens of galactic vessels without causing physical contact. It was as if the laws of physics bent around its presence. You cannot do this, Admiral Rex shouted. There are laws, treaties, established protocols for contact between civilizations. Written by whom? The voice asked. Enforced by whom? Respected by whom? You speak of laws while you violate every principle those laws claim to protect. Around the edges of the galactic fleet, more human ships began appearing. Not with the dramatic materializations they had used before, but gradually, as if they had always been there and were simply choosing to become visible. Each one was different, some crystalline, others organic, a few that seemed to be made of solidified light itself. We offer you a choice, the voice announced, and suddenly every person in the fleet could hear it as clearly as if someone were standing beside them. You can continue as you are, fighting over scraps, consuming worlds, treating sentient life as a resource to be exploited. We will not stop you. Confused murmurs rippled through the fleet. This was not the ultimatum they had expected. But, the voice continued, and the single word carried the weight of absolute certainty, you will do so in isolation. Earth's sphere of influence now extends to every system where intelligent life has been threatened by your expansion. Those worlds are under our protection now. The screens throughout the fleet displayed a galactic map, but it looked nothing like the territorial charts they were familiar with. Vast areas of space were now marked with the gentle blue glow that had become humanity's symbol. Systems they had claimed, worlds they had planned to exploit, trade routes they had controlled for centuries. All of it was now marked as human space. You cannot claim half the galaxy, War Prime Ulan roared. We have not claimed it, the voice replied calmly. We have accepted responsibility for it. There is a difference. Minister Vale from the Independent Systems Alliance activated his communicator. What about our existing colonies? Our established settlements? Any world where you have built something greater than what you destroyed to build it, you may keep. Any population you have elevated rather than exploited, you may continue to guide. But the days of taking whatever you want simply because you have the power to take it are over. The implications began to sink in across the fleet. Entire economies were based on resource extraction from uninhabited worlds. Trade routes depended on unrestricted access to strategic systems. Military strategies assumed the right to claim territory through superior force. This is impossible, Admiral Rex said, though his voice lacked its earlier certainty. You cannot monitor every system, protect every threatened species, patrol every trade route. The galaxy is too vast. You still think in terms of ships and soldiers, the voice explained patiently. We think in terms of information and influence. We have been watching you for 1,000 years. We know which worlds you target, which species you threaten, which resources you covet. We will be there first. As if to demonstrate the point, the displays showed real-time images from across the galaxy. Human vessels, or structures it was, difficult to tell the difference, appearing in disputed systems around threatened worlds, near populations that had been marked for displacement or exploitation. How? Breathed Fleet Coordinator Mills. We learned something you did not. The voice replied, that the universe is not about competition, but about cooperation. Not about taking what you need, but about growing what everyone needs. Not about being the strongest, but about helping others become strong. The massive human ship completed its impossible passage through the galactic fleet and positioned itself between them and Earth. Behind it, the home system of humanity finally revealed itself in its full glory. Structures that spanned the distances between planets. Worlds transformed from barren rocks into gardens that could be seen from space. Asteroid belts reorganized into geometric patterns that suggested vast cities floating in the void. And around everything, a sense of harmony and purpose that made the greatest achievements of galactic civilization look like the crude scratchings of children. This is what we built in our silence, the voice said. This is what becomes possible when you choose to nurture rather than exploit, to grow rather than take, to heal rather than harm. War Prime Ulan made one last attempt to salvage something from the confrontation. And if we refuse, if we choose to fight you for control of the galaxy, then you will fight alone, came the gentle reply, and you will lose not because we are stronger, but because we have already won the only war that matters, the war against the idea that strength must come at the expense of others. The galactic fleet hung in space, their weapons useless, their authority meaningless, their entire understanding of power and civilization challenged by beings they had dismissed as extinct primitives. Go home, the voice said finally. Think about what you have seen. Decide what kind of galaxy you want to help create. When you are ready to build instead of take, to heal instead of harm, to grow instead of consume, we will be here. One by one, control of their ships was returned to them. One by one, the greatest military leaders in known space turned their fleets around and began the long journey home. Behind them, Earth continued its ancient rotation, no longer silent, no longer hidden, and no longer willing to watch the galaxy destroy itself in the name of civilization. The age of the gardeners had begun, and nothing would ever be the same.